Hello, it is nice to see you again. Let us guide you through our newest Poet's Pen build. The new transfigured SOULREND of the Spiral is a quite surprising skill. It deals similar damage as the regular SOULREND, except it shoots 5 projectiles in a circle around you. However, it appears that the sequence firing bypasses the regular projectile rules, allowing you to hit the target a few times with a single cast. It requires you to stand very close to the enemy and scales very well with sources of additional projectiles. The returning projectiles obtained via support gem or the Nimmy's ring add another layer of insanity. It is still a bit random, but you can expect 5 to 10 hits per single use of this skill. This SOULREND unfortunately has a very slow cast time, so it is best to use triggers. In this setup, we use the Poet's Pen and the Squire's Shield to trigger SOULREND every time you perform any wand attack. The attack of choice is the Frenzy, combined with cast on crit setup to automate curses. As a solution to the mana sustain problem, we recommend using an Eldritch Battery Keystone and a Watcher's Eye Jewel with the Energy Shield on hit modifier. You will also need a decent amount of Energy Shield on your gear and the Discipline Aura. You obviously can use the Mageblood Belt with a mana cost reduction flask, but it is not required at all. SOULREND of the Spiral deals moderate damage with hits. It needs the shotgunning behavior to truly shine. In this version, we decided on the hit crit version, but poisons are also viable. The Poet's Pen offers less damage than cast on crit setup, but compensates with a greater quality of life and clear speed. This build uses a lot of defensive layers. You will convert large amounts of physical damage to be taken as elemental, suppress spells, evade attacks, recover life with Defiance of Destiny, Bloodnotch, and Life Leech, curse enemies to deal less damage, and potentially blind nearby enemies or be elusive at all times. It has excellent clear speed thanks to fast triggers and great area coverage of the SOULREND. You will need good positioning, but the single target potential is very high due to many shotgunning projectiles. The build uses a lot of unique items, most of which are required for smooth gameplay. Remaining rare items are rather cheap and simple. This build will obviously require the Poet's Pen. Both Nimmy's and the Squire provide roughly 100% more damage for this build. Remaining uniques are focused on defenses, which shouldn't be skipped either, as SOULREND requires you to be in melee range. A core unique. It will automatically trigger socketed spells when you perform any attack. You can corrupt it to gain even more attack speed. It changes the base attack speed, which makes it easier to scale. You will need at least a 9% or 27% cooldown recovery rate to get more triggers per second. Thanks to this shield you can make your Poet's Pen setup a proper 6-link. It doesn't provide any significant defensive value, but the extra damage is definitely worth it. An unquestionable best in slot ring for this build. It doubles your damage by returning the projectiles, and the randomized direction makes it more likely to hit enemies standing directly in front of you. At first you can use the returning projectile support, but it obviously won't be as good. The Anathema raises your curse limit up to 5, which is more than enough for any build. You can automate them with various triggering or on-hit setups. Try to get a useful corruption here, as the base energy shield is quite lacking. Currently the Lightning Coil is the best defensive armor in the game for the majority of builds. You can use a corrupted version that reduces the damage you take from enemy critical strikes. If you can't get enough resistance, use the Cloak of Flame instead. The Defiance of Destiny is a very powerful defensive amulet that renders you almost immune to non-lethal damage. You can boost the life recovered amount with Fertile Catalysts, or corrupt it to get a more useful implicit than the default mana regen. You can also use the Replica Dragonfang. It is an offensive alternative for your amulet. It grants you a ton of damage via additional gem levels. The reservation efficiency bonus is not enough to fit another aura anyway. The discipline-related modifier that grants you Energy Shield on hit solves the sustain issues almost completely. You can also use other useful modifiers, but it can be quite expansive in combination with the discipline modifier. The Brutal Restraint converts nearby Keystone into a traitor, which generates flask charges if you have empty flask slots. It also adds useful bonuses to your other passives. It is nice to have, but not mandatory. You can also use the Lethal Pride for better damage, but worse Flask sustain. With the Balance of Terror, casting your Despair Curse will cause you to inflict Withered on all your hits. If you have other sources of Wither, you can adjust your curse setups to get a different bonus. With this combo you can purposefully become susceptible to stuns, which will instantly heal you for over half of the damage taken. The stuns will be barely noticeable, but can occasionally interrupt your skills. Thanks to the Energy Shield Mastery, stuns will be based on the Energy Shield protecting your life, which is 0. This combination of jewels allows you to borrow an Ascendancy node from all Shadow's Ascendancies. There are a lot of good options to choose from, such as the Born in the Shadow, Polymath, like Clockwork, or Mistwalker. On your rare items, you should mostly look for defensive bonuses, maximum life, energy shield for your Eldritch Battery, spell suppression, and resistance. You will also need bonuses to your cooldown recovery rate and enough attack speed to actually make use of it. Here you should get a lot of maximum life, energy shield, and resistance. Use the Eldritch Implicits and Crafted Prefix to gain physical damage mitigation in the form of damage taken conversion. You can also use a trigger modifier to activate your curses instead of the cast on crit setup. If you severely lack an energy shield to cast your skills, you can use a rare armor with tons of energy shield, an additional critical strike chance for spells, or a chance to explode enemies when you kill them. It shouldn't be your permanent solution, as the physical damage reduction will be lacking. Use a Stygian Vice to get an additional Abyss socket. Aim for high maximum life, strength, any flask modifier, and an empty suffix to craft the cooldown recovery rate via crafting bench. You can also aim for the influenced base with that modifier, as it can reach higher values, but it will be quite expensive. The extra Abyss Jewel acquired by your belt can be used to improve your maximum life, cover lacking resistance or attributes, and improve your critical strike multiplier. It can also be used to get a little bit of cooldown recovery rate or become immune to corrupted blood. On your boots you should look mostly for maximum life and movement speed, paired with necessary resistance or attributes. You will want to stand on top of enemies anyway, so you can greatly benefit from the Eldritch Implicit that drops a Burtled Ground for an extra 2% critical strike chance. You can also opt for more cooldown recovery rate, but it might be hard to achieve it without significant investments. Your gloves should provide you with a lot of maximum life, energy shield, and resistance. They can also provide a little bit of damage, but it is not that impactful. The Eldritch Implicits are quite important, as they grant you a chance to unnerve enemies and life leech. At first you can use a rare ring with bonuses to your maximum life, resistance, attribute, and critical strike damage. You can also use it to apply a level 1 curse on hit. Don't spend too much on it, you will want to use unique rings later anyway. Your biggest source of increased chaos damage modifiers. You can use a combination of 3 notables that grant a 30% increased damage, or include the Unspeakable Gifts notable for additional explosions. It should have a maximum of 8 additional passive skills. Those jewels are very important for this build, and you can use up to 4 of them. They grant you an absurd amount of damage against enemies standing close. Projectile speed is vital for smooth clear speed and reduces the time you have to wait for returning projectiles. The Traitor Keystone allows you to easily sustain your flasks, but you can opt for a regular 5 flask setup instead. There is no particular flask that you would need. Our recommended setup consists of Diamond Flask with mana cost of skills reduction, Jade Flask with evasion rating bonus, Life Flask with bleeding removal, and the Quicksilver Flask with crit strike chance bonus. SOULREND of the Spiral fires projectiles in a circle around you, dealing moderate chaos damage on hit and applying a damage over time effect. It can hit the same target many times. The projectiles are fired in a sequence instead of the usual all at once. By using the greater multiple projectiles you will lower the damage of a singular projectile, but deal more damage overall. It will also improve your clear speed and sustain. The SOULREND greatly scales with the additional gem levels provided by some of the support gems. Frenzy is a wand attack that generates frenzy charges on hit. It gains more attack speed for every frenzy charge you have. You should aim for 4.3 attacks per second to match your Poet's Pen cooldown. Going over that number will cause you to sometimes attack without triggering a spell. Enfeeble lowers the damage and accuracy of your enemies. You can also use the temporal chains to slow them down instead. Punishment significantly improves your damage against enemies under 50% of their maximum life. It works very well with the ambush and assassinate notable. This setup is used to trigger the SOULREND, but also to automatically apply 2 curses. Your accuracy and crit chance will be quite poor, but you only need to trigger them once per 10 seconds. Those hits will also replenish your energy shield. This aura increases your elemental resistances and makes you immune to all elemental ailments. The quality of this gem now further increases the resistance you get. It is a necessary aura to sustain your spells. It improves your maximum energy shield and makes it faster to recharge. It also enables a very important modifier on the Watcher's Eye. Grace is your another defensive aura. It grants you a lot of evasion rating and improves it further. Improves your accuracy rating and critical strike chance. It is not that impactful, so you can leave it at a low gem level so it reserves a small amount of mana. With the aura notables on your passive tree, you will be able to use this setup without the Enlightened support. If you want to use a high-level precision for some reason, consider linking it with the Arrogance support. Zealotry is the only offensive aura you can use. It improves your spell damage and critical strike chance with spells. Thanks to the Divine Blessing and the Eldritch Battery Keystone, you can use this aura as a temporary buff. The Inspiration support is optional, as you will spend and regain your energy shield very rapidly anyway. Sniper's Mark greatly increases your damage with projectiles. You could also use the Assassin's Mark if your crit chance is still low. You should automate this skill with the mark on hit support. It will lower its effectiveness, but it is a worthy trade-off. Despair is a very important curse. It lowers the chaos resistance of affected foes. Casting it manually will enable the balance of Terror Jewel for the Withering debuff. Frostblink is an instant blink skill that leaves a chilling ground in both locations. You can also use the Flame Dash or Shield Charge if you prefer them. Creates a shield that absorbs part of the incoming damage and disables bleeding. It is ineffective on low gem levels, so if you lack strength you should use the Immortal Call instead. You should kill all the bandits to get 2 more passive skill points. The bonuses from the Alira are not useful enough in this case to consider helping her. The best major Pantheon power for this build is the Soul of Era Kali, which reduces the damage you receive from various dot effects. Remember that the Soul of the Brine King, which you might pick up during the campaign, ruins the Bloodnotch combo. The minor Pantheon power is flexible, but the Soul of Shikari seems to be the most useful one. During leveling you should rely on the damage over time portion of chaos spells and transition to hit damage when your critical strike chance is sufficient enough to be worthwhile. There are not many sources of chaos damage for hits on the passive tree. Most of it will come from your cluster jewels. On the other hand, chaos damage over time multiplier bonuses are abundant. You should transition around level 70 after you defeat the Katava. As mentioned before, the passive tree doesn't provide too many bonuses for chaos damage. You should focus on the maximum life, spell suppression, auras, and critical strikes. The Energy Shield Leech Mastery that grants instant leech will also apply to your life leech, which makes it a very powerful recovery tool. To enable the Bloodnotch combo you should allocate the Energy Shield Mastery, which will make you get stunned by every hit. You can also anoint the Unfaltering Notable to recover even more life from the stunning hits. If you are playing in the Affliction League, the Primalist Ascendancy for the additional charms is the obvious choice. They can provide you with extra damage and survivability via spell suppression, endurance charge generation, increased effect of wither, or additional crits. They are strong, but not build defining. If you have any questions regarding the build left, feel free to ask them in the comments. If you want to see more of our work, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.